Hey folks, OPTCG here, and in today's video we are going to be taking a look at 3 cards in each different color that I think are the best to pick up right now. Now, I have asked the community as well in the Reddit subreddit, the OnePieceTCG subreddit, sorry. These questions, I asked the community to give me 3 cards for each color, one being a budget card, one being a meta-defining card, and the other one being a card that you would make sure that you have a playset of for in the future. There is a link to this in the description. It's the first thing you'll see in the description, and as you can see, there are quite a lot of comments. A lot of these have given really nice in-depth breakdowns of their opinions on the most important cards right now because of those reasons that I just outlined. So I'd be really grateful if you could go and take a look at that. I've based some of my answers off the ideas that they gave. They made me think deeply, and you might get some feedback, especially if you're looking to pick some cards up, or if you're just interested in what people's opinions are. Work together as a community is super nice, so thank you to everyone who left a comment and has, been a part of the community. So check that out. But firstly, let's get into some of the actual cards that the community raised. So you can see here in this amazing mind map, let me just move my ginormous face out of the way. I've put together a mind map, word map. This thing, basically, the bigger the word is, the more often that the word came up in the comments. So you can see words like Moria, so that's 8-cost Gecko Moria, pudding, which is 4-cost blue pudding, and I've just put it there as a nice graphic to showcase some of the most highlighted cards that actually came out and were raised by the community straight away. There were some definitely interesting one. Yamato, that's yellow Yamato, came up, which is that one over there, and that's quite high. Egghead Nami was one of the biggest shockers for me, but yeah, that's a nice graphic to just be able to look at. And yeah, so before we actually get into the breakdown of what each color I think should be picking up right now, I actually have a set of generic cards that I think are quite important to pick up in the form of the 0-cost events. Now, there are 6 0-cost events, one for each color, and you can see that they came from multiple different sets: OP03, OP05, 04, 06, 03, 02, even with the blue Gum Rain, which is this one. But throughout every meta, at some point, one of these cards had probably been ran as a 2-off. In yellow's cases, it's a 4-off because of an L. There were even times where we ran the black one, and when blue was not just pure Dofu, we also did run Gum Rain when we ran too many brick cards. If I were you and I were looking to build a collection, or I was slowly trying to improve my collection of cards, I would look to at least own 2 of each color. If you know you only play specific colors, I would hyperfixate on them. For example, right now I've been playing a lot of Purple Luffy, so I would make sure that I have at least a few Gum Jet Gatlings. Even though it's not a card that's particularly ran right now, if in the future I decide to stick with purple, it might be a card that I decide to throw in as a 1-of or even a 2-of, because we've seen them come up. We've seen Bad Manners Kick Course just top in Shanks's in the Latam, was it the Card Fest? Yeah, I think it was the Nationals, whichever. But we saw that they ran Bad Manners Kick Course, and they ran more copies than we usually ran before. And it's one of those cards where sometimes you'll just see people running 1 or 2 of, and you'll be like, oh, I don't own those. And they all cost less than £1. So I'm going to do a lot of the pricing based on pounds because I'm based in the UK or in Europe. So if you're from the US, this might be very different for your pricing. One of the cards that I'm highlighting is Hody Jones, and in the UK it's less than £1, a few quid to pick it up. In the US, for some reason on TCG Player it was $10. So take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt if you're from the US. But let's get into it. This is the first color that we're going to cover. We're going to cover green. Green is a color that kind of has been left for a little bit. The most recent deck is Bonnie. That's had a lot of look up, but bar that, there hasn't really been a lot of noise from the deck, the color, other than Kinemon very early on. We didn't see a lot of actual movement, and Bonnie has a very specific type of playstyle. So yeah, what are the cards that we're going to look at? Let's take a look. So these are the 3 categories that we're going to be covering as well: budget, meta, and a need 4x. So the same categories that I mentioned that I posted in the Reddit post. Make sure you check it out. But these are the 3 cards that I've decided to go with. I'm going to highlight the card and how much it costs, again, in UK/Europe. So the budget card that I've gone for green is Hody Jones. So again, this is budget where I am. Might not be budget where you are, but I think this is a card that is super valuable just in general for the color. It's a card where I can see it running and like smashing into a lot of decks. It's a 7 cost, so in that weird like strange place where you're not really at your higher end cards, but you're not really at your lower end cards. You're in that higher end of mid range where you want to be able to put a card out on 7 Don, for example, with curve. The Hoodie Jones has Rush, which is again not something that green really has access to, so being able to push through more damage is something that it usually needs, as it's usually very control based. And it has an on play of rest up to total of 2 of your opponent's characters or Don cards, and then add 1 card from the top of your life cards to your hand. Now I really like this because it, 1, deals with blockers and helps you push through games sometimes, but 2, it can also choose Don. Right now, again, I just mentioned Purple Luffy, that's running around a little bit right now, and they've been using the 1 cost Gum Gum Giant, playing down the Hoodie Jones and resting your opponent's Don so they can't use 1 cost events can be meta defining, can be like a way for you to push through and win in times where you didn't really have a chance to win. So I think it's a really nice card. And also, as green, I think you can sometimes struggle with resources, and if your opponent starves you, so leaves you on 4 or 5 life, being able to play a Hoodie Jones on curve, punish them by swinging into the board, because you can rest the characters on curve, swing at them. It's got a really nice body stat, and get a life means you have access to even more resources. I think it's a really nice control card, and I think it's one that catches people off guard a lot if you're playing it in a deck that doesn't usually run it. So it's a card that I would pick up. It's really cheap right now, especially where I am. I would make sure that I have a playset of it personally myself, and it's just a really nice strong card. Next, we'll take a look at the meta pick that I went with. I've gone with 10 cost Dofi. Now, there are some other ones, and I've put in need for another card that you're definitely going to have seen before, but I put 10 cost Dofi because it's a card where I have been in the past where I've just went, well, if they have back-to-back 10 cost Dofis, I've lost the game. We're getting out of that phase now with the format becoming a lot more aggressive, Doflamingo being a lot around a lot more, but as we fall back out of aggressive and we go back to mid-range and late control formats, being able to have a card that just says nope is super strong. It's really cheap right now. It just got reprinted in PRB. It would be a card that I make sure that I have 4 of, and if I were running green, I'd be looking to run at least 3 depending on what the meta says. So I think Dofi is great. And the other card that I've put in here is Captain Kidd. Obviously these could be interchanged between themselves, the Dofi and the Kidd. I think both are super strong. I think the Kidd is really nice right now. Into the Dofi, for example, I think they'd really struggle to get rid of it. It is also extremely cheap right now. It got reprinted in PRB as well alongside the Doflamingo, but it's just been a meta defining as well as a card that you'd want to own if you were playing green since it came out, really. Like the amount of times where I've been in an overwhelmingly positive position against green, and then they've just dropped a Kidd and I've just been like, I don't have an answer for that, and they drop a Kidd and they drop blocker, and I go, what am I supposed to do here? It's an 8k base and I have to swing into it. I think it's a card that, again, catches people off guard. It's really strong and allows you to catch back up. It's a card where I can imagine putting this into a deck that on paper would be bad, but can allow you to steal some wins. So I would make sure that I pick up the Kidd. Now, I've also added another section, which is honorable mentions. So these are some of the cards that I really like for green. Maybe not necessarily the most meta defining or cards that you have to pick up, right? But there are cards that I would like to own in my collection. 1, because I think they're really cool. 2, because I think they're strong. And yeah, I don't have a 3. This is all I have. Zoro came out in OP06, and as I was playing BY Luffy, this was the bane of my existence. Like, it's a card that just says, if you don't clear this, I'm probably gonna win. Like, it's that simple. And right now it's difficult because we've got so many cards that like have ways to get around it, but I can always see this being a card that may squeeze back into the meta if we get a card that like gives big bodies rush, for example. If we get a card that gives big bodies protection, it's a 9 cost that swings 3 times for a huge amount. How many times have we been shut up? Next, I've put 5 cost Bonnie here, but this could also be 5 cost Carrot. They do similar things with an on play of stunning one of your opponent's characters. I've decided to go with the Bonnie here because I like the utility of being able to stun any cost size of the character and also being able to stun a Don. I like that you can stun a Don into some of these really critical matchups, like again BY Luffy. If you stun a Don when they were about to go to 10 so they could do Moria effect and 2 cost on leader, you can immediately just stop them from playing the game, which is, you know, it's pretty good, I guess. I'll put 2 cost Rosinante, and when this card was announced I was like, it's just a blocker, but the card is really good. It works perfectly in tandem with the 8 cost Kidd that I just mentioned, and it's a really nice way to just be able to stop your big black bodies from being KO'd by your opponent's character effects. And this also stacks if your opponent uses something that like wipes something in multiple at once. For example, Lucci, you can use Rosinante to just stop the entire thing, which is really nice. And then I put Birdcage here. I think this is probably the one where you look at and you just go, why the heck is Birdcage on here? I think this is a card where like we get a green Doflamingo leader, and people don't really pay attention to it in a format like Doflamingo, where we have these, you know, the Dofi running rampant, and it just says you can't play the game, and it's like, oh, okay, that's pretty good, huh? I think it's good. I think it's never really been in the situation where it's been able to really capitalize on it, but I think it's a really strong controlling card that hasn't had its time to shine, and I think it might catch some people off guard in the probably far future when we get a card that people aren't paying attention to. Next up, we're going to look at the black color. This is probably one of my least favorite ones to cover because it's cards that you've more than likely already seen. It's black has been in the meta non-stop. But the cards I've decided to go with for budget is Suru. It's a card that has been reprinted in countless sets and in the starter decks as well. But it's really valuable, right? It's a 1-cost 2k counter that does everything that black wants it to do. It gives one of your opponent's characters on play -2 cost, which allows you to then, you know, do rest of your combos to KO things depending on cost. I think this leans perfectly into what black currently wants to do and has always wanted to do, which is just be able to use combo pieces in your hand, right? Like, not only is it 2k, which black has always struggled to like have resource wise a way to defend itself, it's an additional combo piece if you need it, and like a line to rely upon. It's really, really cheap right now, being again less than £1, even cheaper than that. I saw some for like 2 cents on Card Market earlier, because it's just been reprinted so many times. It's a card I would make sure that I have 4 of in my collection, because if I'm playing black, I'm probably going to be running this. The other thing to mention is that like you can't add it back to hand with the likes of Rebecca, the 4-cost blocker, but that's like really not a problem. We have other targets for that. The meta card I've gone with is a boring one that you've all seen far too many times in your existence. It's Gecko Moria. Of course it's Gecko Moria. It's the card that people have been crying for a ban for a long time, and it's just very, very strong. It's been meta defining for many sets now. If there's a black deck, it's probably running Gecko Moria. The only black deck that we've seen in a long time that isn't running it is the Teach, the Blackbeard, and the reason is because they don't get on-play effects. This card is super cheap now. It used to be worth quite like a few pounds, but it just got reprinted again in PLB. So yeah, definitely make sure you've got these. If you're playing black right now, and make sure you get them. The only thing to keep in mind is that, again, people have been crying for a ban for this for a while. I don't know whether a ban will ever come for this. I don't really know if it's needed right now, I'll be honest. I think the meta is quite healthy in OPO9, but if you buy them and it gets banned, obviously take that on your own advice. Obviously these are alt arts as well. I would buy the most base variations. I just went with the alt arts because they were difficult to find arts for the actual base cards that didn't just have like giant words like sample written on it, or like a picture of someone's hand holding the card. But the last card that we have here is Rebecca, and this is the card that I would pick 4 of. Let me move my giant head out the way. Rebecca's currently about £3 or £4 on Card Market. It might be even more again if you're in the US or if you're buying from a trade group, but it's a card that I would make sure that I have 4 of. I think this card is broken. I think this card is like so extremely strong. It's super combo heavy and orientated. Like if Gecko Murray gets banned, I just see like black decks running like more combos relying on Rebecca, like Rebecca Hema Lucci. Remember that? Like that was good back in the day, huh? And I think it's a card that just gives you so much value. It's a blocker, adds a card back to your hand, and you get to play a card all for 4 Don. It also has counter, so it's really, really good. I would make sure that I have 4 of this. It can be, again, a little bit on the spendier side if you don't have all that money to invest in the game, but it's a card that I think you can again put into most black decks and get a lot of value from. The honorable mentions that we're going with for black are the following. Let me move my dome back over here. There it is. There's my dome. Sabo, 5-cost Sabo over there. I didn't put this in the main page because I think it's a card that isn't 100% necessary, but it's really, 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 really nice to have. We've seen it in so many decks. If you're running BY Luffy, obviously this is a 4 of, right? Like most Lucci decks or other black decks are running this as a 2 or a 3 of. but it's so expensive right now. And when choosing out of cards, I would much rather have Gecko Moria in my deck than Sabo. And seeing as how Gecko Moria costs £1 or £2 and Sabo costs like 10 plus, I would prioritize the Gecko Morias if I were you. But Sabo is really good. If you're in a position to be able to buy them, I would buy them. The ability to stop your opponent from KOing effects is really strong and has been very strong for the past few sets, but also allowing you to filter your hand when using a color that likes to grab cards from the bin is really nice. Next up is Brook, another card that is costing an arm and a leg right now. I think this is like £15 plus, if not more. I would hope that it would tame down because Lucci's kind of like falling out of the meta a little bit more than what it had in last sets, but it's still really, really high. But if you own these, congratulations, you won. If you don't own these, I don't know whether I'd pick them up right now. They're really expensive for the actual card value that you get, depending on whether you're trying to run like the most meta variants of your list. If you are, then of course buy them. Sadly, you must. But if not, then I would shy away. I'll put Jack here. I think Jack's a card that in the future is going to get even more value. I think having a card like this or like the 7-cost Newgate in red that allows you to just have a huge body that is hard to remove, that constantly per turn can allow you to get rid of one of your opponent's cards is really, really nice. What's even nicer about Jack is obviously it's got the additional +4 costs, so it's hard to remove in any like black, for example, that would counter itself. But also it has a little bit of filter, so you can discard a card, draw a card, and then you still get the ability to KO one of your opponent's cards. And then the last card I've put here is Spandine, move my dome again. This card is stupid, right? Like, it's, again, it was really good in the last format that we just had in OPO8 and OPO8.5, OPO7 as well. Wait, no. EB. In EB. There you go. Losing more marbles. In EB, anyway. But being able to do Rebecca into Spandine into Lucci is just so strong for a 4-cost play. For four Don, you're able to play, 11 cards worth of value, which is Moria-esque, right? Like scary amounts of value. So if CP gets any future support again, I think it could be a card that could like go over the line, and I think it's something that would make sure that Bandai are paying attention to the cards that they're releasing. Next up on the list is red. We're going to be taking a look at some of the red cards that are in the format right now, or cards that I think that you should be picking up if you are looking to play a red deck in the future. Obviously, the most popular red deck right now is Shanks. We haven't really seen a red deck be very, very popular in the meta for a while. Zorro had a little bit of play recently, and then obviously, well, we had red, purple, lore, but that's banned now. So yeah, Shanks is very popular, and because of that, some of the pricing has gone up as well. But this is some of the cards that I would pick up. If for budget, I would pick up and make sure that I own 4 copies of 2-cost Sanji. This has been reprinted many times, so you should be able to get your hands on this relatively cheap. I've just put the normal less than £1 value. Again, I think I saw these for like 2 pence each on Card Market, so 2 cents, like whatever that is. Super cheap. I think red struggles again with card draw, so being able to have a card that is both offensive and allows you to self-damage so that you can have access to resources if your opponent is trying to starve you is really nice. It's not a card that I saw a lot of people mention in the Reddit post, but I just think it's really, really good. If I weren't going with this, I would go with some of the 1-cost events, but Sanji is one of my favorite cards, so I've decided to go for it. It's a card that I've used in most of my red decks, so yeah, I would pick them up, and it is ran sometimes in the Shanks deck as well. Next up is Meta, and a card that I'm sure a lot of you have seen right now with Shanks being super popular. I hate to see that price tag, £30+ each, probably even more if you're based in the US, but this card is really strong. It's one of the best cards that has been released for red in quite a while. It's really, really nice removal, but also the ability to give your opponents 2 characters -3,000 and -2,000 power means that you're slowing your opponent down for a complete turn. Like, that's until your opponent's next turn, which is something a lot of people forget, and it's a nice way to be able to just slow your opponent down in these more heavier control-based decks. Unfortunately, if you're playing red in the meta right now, I think you need to own at least 3 copies of this. I think you should be running 4, but I think you can get away with 3 sometimes. But I think this card is really, really good. Like, undervaluing the words that I'm saying, I think this card is like deck defining. I think Shanks would probably struggle without Rayleigh, to be honest. It bridges the gap between early game and late game for the deck. So if you're looking to play red, unfortunately, you're gonna have to spend a pretty penny, but I think it's worth it. I think it's a really, really strong card. And the last card is Otama. Another another 2k counter, but one of my favorites. Also easily available, reprinted many times. Another 2k counter for red, but just on play, give up to one of your opponent's characters minus 2k. This card has been used since I joined the game. It's got really nice utility. You're able to clear many of your opponent's characters by reducing it once and then swinging into it. We saw things with the Trafalgar Law early days, like playing this, bouncing it, being able to then control your opponent's board. We see it like all the way through Newgate, for example. We saw this in Zorro. No matter whether you're playing an aggressive deck or a control deck or a mid-range deck or a tempo deck, you're probably going to want to run the Otama. It's a defensive card, but also it's a card that allows you to have a controlling aspect when playing into some of your opponent's scarier cards. So it's a card I was always say that you'd need 4 of in your collection, and I just think it's a really, really nice card. So yeah, onto some of the honorable mentions for red. I've went with a few different cards than you might expect, different again from what was said in the Reddit. I've mentioned some of my favorite cards and cards that have caught me off guard. Got Diablo Jambe, Gold Roger, which just came out in OP09. I've added Kid and Killer, and I've added Dragon as well. Diablo Jambe, I think, is just a card where if you're playing Straw Hats, it's really nice to have. We've been through a lot of formats right now where blockers are just prevalent everywhere, and having a card that just says, nope, I'm going to win anyway is really nice. That's also what Gold Roger does. It's a big version of Diablo Jambe without a reliance on you needing to have a Straw Hat, and I think he's just super cool as well. I think it's a really unique ability, and I would like to own a few. I do own a few. If you're looking to play red, I would own at least 1 or 2. Like, it's nice to sprinkle it in. I think it can snatch some wins. I've added Kid and Killer here because I think it's a card that people are currently undervaluing because of the way that the format is laying out. But I think in the future it might pop back in. A 4 cost that swings for 7k with Rush, I think is just really, really nice value and will be really strong again one day. And then the final card here is Monkey D. Dragon, which is a card that some people were saying should be in the main list, and I can't really argue with that. It's a really good card, but I think it deserves honorable mention more so than the other ones that I've went with, so that's why I've decided to put it here. Rush, give up to 2 rested done to one of your leaders or characters. A lot of the time you're playing this, swinging 7 with lead, swinging 9 with the dragon, because it's got the Rush as well, which is just super, super good. Really nice value. Really strong tempo play, allows you to steal cards from your opponent's hands or push damage through or even control the board. It's really nice. I like how much you can actually like change the game by just playing this out on curve sometimes. I think it's really, really strong. There's also the 1 cost red event that I'm completely forgetting the name of right now, which is the Shambles. All of my friends who play red, Luke is going to kill me, but it's the one where if you have 2 or less life it gains +2 counters. It's a 4k counter for 1, which I think is just really, really strong. I haven't put it here, I was just going to mention it myself. Yeah, that's a card that I would look to pick up too. The next color that we're going to look at is blue. I think we should fly through this one. I've took some time gabbing. First card is Gravity Blade. Being able to put 2 of your opponent's 6 cost LS characters in the bottom of the deck is broken, and this really excites me when we've got like Usopp coming out, which is another blue-black leader which reduces cost, and just seeing cards like this that are this cheap that allow you to control your opponent's board so effectively is really, really nice, and also it's a really strong trigger. Meta, I've put Jinbei. I didn't want to put Jinbei, I'm not going to lie, but I've put it there to respect how strong Doflamingo is right now. I would much rather put some like more average cards that can be ran, generic cards, I was thinking, sorry, that can be ran in multiple decks. So I was going to put Pudding here, but Jinbei won it over for me. I think it's really, really strong, and without Jinbei, I don't think Doflamingo would be as strong as it is in the format right now, so I have to acknowledge Jinbei. And then the last card that I've said you need 4 of is Kaido. I think this card is so unbelievably undervalued. It's a card that literally is a huge body that says on play, draw 4 cards. Every other card game would go crazy for something like this, right? It's super cheap to buy right now, like less than £2 each. And like I've put £2, and that's me being generous because it's a little bit cheaper than that in the UK. But I think this is a card where when we get like more of those grindy blue decks rather than the aggro mid-range that we've got with Doflamingo, Kaido come shining back. We've already seen the draw Kaido being put into the Doflamingo in earlier formats where there were more decks that like you needed a bigger body in it, for example against BY Luffy, and it was a godsend then, and I think it will come back up in the future. I think it's a really strong card. some of the honorable mentions for blue. Pudding, like I just mentioned there, broken card. I hate this card. I hate this card design, but let's not turn this into me turning into a hating Pudding video. I think it's terrible card design, but I also think it's really strong, and you should own 4 copies of this card. If you're playing blue, you're probably playing a few of them, and it's a card where no matter if you run them or not, your opponent has to keep in the back of their mental, is my opponent going to tap 4, play Pudding, and ruin my entire day? Because that happens a lot. Next up, I put Houndblaze, which is a card you might not expect to see here. It's not one that, again, was on the Reddit, but for me, it was meta-defining when it was ran in Sakazuki, and I think it has a lot of different utilizations. It's a card that allows you to get 3k power for 2 Don, which is just always nice. We have Amaru, for example, in yellow. We saw when that was so strong. But also bottom decking instead of KOing is really nice. It bottom decks a 2 cost or less character. So when we have a black-blue deck that reduces power, I imagine are going to see Houndblaze again, which is just super nice. Next is Perfume Fuma. Fuma. I'm going to go with it. Being able to just say your blockers mean nothing, swing for game, is the reason that Toby can snatch games so often right now. We just again saw in the Latin final that if the Doflamingo had their Fuma, they may have won the game at one point. They bottomed it instead of keeping it on top. So it's really strong, and it's won me many games when I've tested. And the last mention I've went with is Boa Hancock. I think it's a really, really strong card. On play, one of your opponent's characters, apart from Luffy, because she's in love, right, cannot attack until the end of your opponent's next turn, and then you can place up to 1 character with a cost of 1 or less on the bottom of the owner's deck. I just think a 6/8 that says you can't attack is really strong. Can slow your opponent down a lot. Playing this on tempo just means that you can save cards in your hand because they're not swinging with their characters out, and then you just have a really beefy body to be able to swing back into your opponent. I love her. I picked 4 alts up in the last regional that I went to, and I can't wait to find a deck where I can put her in. Right now I don't think there is one, but I think there will be. I think it's a card that I keep as a tech choice, and I love, and it's not just because it's Boa, I promise. I promise. Next color, and we're going to take a look at yellow. I chose Nami for this one. So yeah, I don't know. It's Nami. She's cool, you know. Budget meta needs 4. Budget beige. You need 4 of this card. This card has been a pain in my ass since OPO4 and will continue to be a pain in my ass for every yellow deck that I ever play against. I have lost games in regionals because of this card. It's disgusting, and you should run it at 4, preferably, in every yellow deck that you possibly can, because sometimes you get super lucky and you just win games because of it, and that's enough in my mind for a reason to run 4 in every yellow deck that you possibly can. Super cheap as well. Again, less than £1. Move my face. Less than £1 each. These are cards that you should just be able to ask your friends for, and they just pass them over to you, in my mind. Next up is 9-cost Yamato, another card that has been meta-defining since its release in OPO4. Most yellow decks have attempted to run this at least at a 4, because once you go down to 1 life, just being able to gain a life is really, really nice, but also it's a 9-cost that says, if you have starved me, I'm going to KO one of your cards, probably, and I think that's really, really nice value. It's been an NL since NL came out. It's really strong, and it just got reprinted in PRB. I think Beige did as well. Did Beige? Let me know. I can't remember. But Yamato definitely got reprinted in PRB, so it's really, really cheap right now and should be really accessible for you to pick up. And then the last card I've went with is Egghead Nami. This is the card and the main card that I was actually swayed by the Reddit post. A lot of people seem to think that this was a very important yellow card going into the future, and I kind of agree, actually. It kind of fills the spot that Gadatsu had, which is the early removal that yellow kind of relies on. If you play against super aggressive decks, you have struggled in the past, unless you're playing a Nell, for example. But being able to have early removal with this Nami is really nice. You trash a trigger card from your hand, KO one of your opponent's 5-cost or less characters, and then if you only have 3 or less characters in your hand, 3 or less cards in your hand, you draw 1 card. It also has the activate to play this card. Activate this card's on play effect trigger, meaning that you can KO one of your opponent's 5-cost cards if you discard. or just filter out your hand to discard a brick and draw another card, which is super nice. 5 to 6 each is a little bit expensive, but I think it's worth it. I think it's a nice card, and I would make sure that I've picked 4 of these up for the future, because I can see it being a card that goes to the moon slight moon, goes slightly to the moon in the future if it becomes a 4 of in a really important meta deck. The honorable mentions, I've got 10 cost Ace, Amaru, I've went with Luffy. I think all 3 of these speak for themselves. They've been key parts of the meta and could come up again in the future. The only thing I will say about the Aces that Nanel was just announced, I think for OP11, correct me if I'm wrong, that basically does what it does, but like also on attack. So, you know, take that as a grain of salt. Whether you're going to want 2 10 costs that both do similar things, maybe. I don't know. Is that overkill? I also don't know. Amaru, just being able to rest a 4 cost or less and give power is really strong. Use it in a control aspect, but most of the time using it to rest a blocker. And then the Egghead Luffy has just shown its value and shone since its release. It's been really prevalent in BY Luffy, but also it's been ran in a lot of just generic yellow decks because it's just a nice way to KO a card, but also draw a card. The last card I went for is Dereshi. I think this is a card that it has been overlooked because it isn't particularly ran heavily right now. It's ran in some NL lists and some Robin lists, but I think having a card that says look at the top 5, add 2 of the most important cards in your deck in your hand, and then put them on the bottom of the deck is really strong. Most yellow decks are running an abundance of trigger cards, and if we're in a situation where the most vital cards that you want to find are your trigger cards, a card that sets you for those I think will have value in the future. A 3 cost to draw 2, we've seen it run in blue that just generically draws 2. Of course you do have the chance to miss with Dereshi, but it doesn't happen a lot in yellow if you're running an abundance of triggers, so it's a card that I really like and I would pick up, and it's super cheap because it's just a rare from OP09. Next up, and the final colour, is purple and Robin. What? That's crazy. That's crazy. Budget meta needs. Here we go. What do you think it's going to be? There is one deck right now that is prevalent for purple, and that's Purple Luffy, and some of the cards in it are here. Gum Gum Giant. Now, I haven't just put this here because it's Purple Luffy. I've put it here because it's a card that says if I'm a purple leader that is a Straw Hat, I just got access to a 1-cost event that is broken, and I think broken is the word I will use. The only downside of this is that it has a done -2 effect, but a card that says I protect you for 4k power, discard a card and draw 2 cards is really, really strong. Very cheap right now. I would pick these up. Again, sooner rather than later. Don't leave it too late before they go up a little bit. You might end up paying £3 or £4 for these if you can't pick them up sooner. Meta, I went with Bonclay, another really expensive card, £25 plus each right now for the base variant of Bonclay, but it's a powerhouse card. It's really nice. It's run as a 2-of currently in Pluffy, but it's been ran off in 4-ofs for RP Law and some earlier decks as well. If you didn't pick these up earlier when they were a bit cheaper, I do feel a bit sorry, but I love this card. On play, you get a Don active from your Don deck. Having it on play that gives you active is not known for a card of this stature super early. Usually it's 4 cost, like Ein, for example, that plays the Don rested, so that's all you're doing on a turn. Playing it active allows you to swing 6 with lead or leave a Don up, which is really nice. And then it has when attacking, select up to one of your opponent's characters. This character's base becomes that base. I love to play this card into Shanks, and I love to play this into the Blackbeard. The amount of times against Blackbeard I've went double Mr. 2 on the turn where they would play a 10 cost, and it makes them really have to think about whether they want to play that 10 cost, because I'm going to swing for 12 at least once, even if you choose to use the effect on it. The last card I've went with is Charlotte Linlin. This is £3 or £4 each. I think this card is really strong. It's a card, again, I overlooked on release, but having heal and purple is really nice. I really look forward to the days where I can see these more control-based purple decks that aren't so far behind because of like how heavy they bash your hand in. Charlotte Linlin giving you heal is really nice. One of my favorite decks in my mind, not an actual reality, is purple yellow Croc, because I like the fact that I can play a purple deck that heals, and having access to Charlotte Linlin in purple is really nice. Just slows down aggression, and I think it's a card we'll see a lot more of in the future. It's a boss monster, right, that just says I can control a bit, I heal. It's really nice tempo. I love it. I think it's a good card to pick up. And then the last and final honorable mentions in the video is the following: Reiju, Queen, Oh Come My Way, which is a card that might shock some of you being in here, like, what is this trash? And Magellan. We've seen Reiju pop off again in RP lore, but we've seen it in the Reiju deck, and we've just seen it in a few purple decks now and then. I think any aggressive purple deck is going to want to run Reiju, so I think it's a card that if you don't have 4 of, it will be a nice pickup to get and just have in your collection. It's not one that you need to rush out and get from the store, right? Like, I wouldn't get in my card now and go buy 4 drastically because I need it, but it's a card that I would make sure that I own, because if you're playing at any point an aggressive purple deck, it's a card that's nice. Queen, again, just got another reprint in PRB. I think Reiju did as well. And it's just a card that says on play, draw 2, trash 1, down -1. It's a 5/6 blocker. Has been a staple in purple since it came out. It's really strong. Like, double Queen on turn is just really good tempo, so being able to do that is nice. I would make sure that I own them. I went with Oh Come My Way. This is a card that I think scares people and shocks them. Catches people off guard. If you haven't played against Baroque Works before and you haven't seen this card before, I think you'll lose most of the time, like, because you won't play around it and you'll be caught off guard. It's a cheap card if we ever get a Baroque's Work leader that like forms into the meta, which I would love, to be honest. Then this is the card that you're going to want to have access to, and I love it. I'm not going to lie, I really love it. I really want to be able to have a deck that this will work in. So I've put it here. It's a bit of a meme. You don't have to pick them up, but it's a common and it's super nice, and I want to see a Baroque Works leader that works. And the last card is Magellan, which is my favorite purple card in the entire game. On play, Don -1, your opponent returns 1 Don card from their deck to from their field to the deck. So good, right? Similar reasons as I said before with the 5-cost Bonnie, stunning your opponent and slowing them down potentially a turn when they would play a really impactful card on curve has been game defining for me. I topped with purple Luffy and relied on Magellan in, what was it, OPO 6 maybe, just being able to put a Don back, and at the time it was stopping the 10-cost Big Mom coming down, because my opponent would go to 10 Don and I put them on 9, but it's that opponent's turn effect as well. When it would be KO'd, your opponent must return 2 Don, as well as the on play as well. Like, it's a card that has just been able to stick, having a body in purple that is able to consistently stick on board because it's too pressuring for your opponent to remove it super early. It has always been really nice for me and I love it. If this had 1k counter, I would run 4 of in every single purple deck and I wouldn't think about it twice. Unfortunately it doesn't. So it doesn't see a lot of play. I've dabbled with it a little bit, but right now it's fell a little bit out of the meta, but it's a card that you should be aware of and can catch you off guard if you're playing a late game variant of decks. But yeah, that's the video. Thank you very much for watching till all of the end. I know it's been a little bit of a long one, but yeah, make sure you check out the Reddit comments and the Reddit community that I linked below. They really did a lot of work and I'm really appreciative for all of the messages that they sent through as well, and it's nice to see people super passionate about the game. Let me know if you have any cards that I missed off this list that you think, this is crazy that I didn't add this. Radical Beam, it's Radical Beam, the 1-cost red event. It's completely skipped my mind. Radical Beam. Anyway, if there's any cards that you think I missed from this video, then let me know, and have a great day. Peace.